What if our greatest enemy is not external oppression, but the silent decay within ourselves? What if the weight of civilization, rather than elevating us, has crushed the very essence of our being? There was a time when man fought against the forces of nature, against beasts, against external threats that sought to annihilate him. His struggle was brutal, but it was clear, tangible. He knew his enemy. But now, in the age of supposed progress, in an era that claims to have liberated him from suffering, his battle has turned inward. The enemy is no longer an external force. It is himself, his own emptiness, his own despair. The comforts of civilization have not made him stronger, but weaker, not wiser, but more confused. The weight of existence has become unbearable, and yet there is no external tyrant to blame, no great catastrophe to explain the anguish that gnaws at him. His suffering is quieter, more insidious, like a disease that spreads through his soul, leaving him hollow, exhausted, indifferent. In the Revolt of the Masses, Ortega y Gasset speaks of a new kind of man, the mass man. This is not merely a political category, but a spiritual condition. The mass man is not defined by his class, his education, or his wealth, but by his inner emptiness, by his inability to transcend himself. He does not reflect. He does not question. He moves through life as if in a dream, consuming, working, distracting himself, never once asking if any of it has meaning. He has inherited a world built by greater men, by thinkers, by creators, by those who suffered in their search for truth. But he feels no need to justify his place in it. He believes himself entitled to everything, yet he understands nothing. He is not aware of his own insignificance because he does not think deeply enough to even recognize the question. And what of the others, those who still feel the weight of existence, who still sense that something is deeply wrong? They do not find themselves liberated by the advances of civilization. Rather, they feel suffocated by them. The same technology that promised to connect them only isolates them further. The same social structures that claim to give them purpose only reduce them to interchangeable parts in an indifferent machine. They look around and see that life has become a performance, an endless repetition of gestures that mean nothing, a cycle of work and consumption with no higher aim. And in this emptiness, in this unbearable weight of meaninglessness, they begin to wonder if the great mistake of modernity was to believe that man could be happy once he was freed from struggle. But what does it mean to be freed from struggle? Was struggle not the very force that once defined man, that gave him direction, that forged his character in the fire of adversity? The great civilizations of the past were not built by men who sought comfort, but by those who endured suffering in the pursuit of something greater than themselves. Yet, the modern world, in its blind pursuit of ease and convenience, has eradicated struggle without replacing it with meaning. It has removed the obstacles, but in doing so, it has also removed the heights to which one might have aspired. And so, man drifts, comfortable, entertained, pacified, but empty. This is the spiritual catastrophe of our time. We have created a world without suffering, yet we suffer more than ever. We have more distractions than any previous generation, yet we are plagued by boredom. We have more means of communication, yet we have never felt more isolated. We have more access to knowledge, yet we understand less and less. This is not progress. It is decay. It is the slow unraveling of the soul beneath the weight of a meaningless existence. Ortega y Gasset, in the Revolt of the Masses, does not merely describe a political phenomenon, but an existential one. The mass man is not simply a product of a democratic system. He is the inevitable result of a civilization that has abandoned its spiritual foundations. He does not know history, nor does he care to know it. He does not contemplate the mysteries of existence, nor does he feel the need to. He exists in the perpetual present, consuming what has been placed before him, reacting rather than acting, following rather than leading. He has inherited a civilization, but has no desire to maintain it. He enjoys its fruits, but he does not question the roots that sustain it. And when those roots wither, when the foundations begin to collapse, he will not recognize what has been lost, because he never truly understood what he had. And so, the decline continues, not through a great catastrophe, not through war or revolution, but through apathy, through slow erosion, through the gradual surrender of everything that once gave life meaning. The mass man does not rebel against this decay. he does not even notice it. He lives in a world of distractions, entertained into submission, pacified by pleasure, content to exist without truly living. But what of those who still see? What of those who feel the weight of this decline, who sense that something fundamental has been lost? They are the ones who suffer the most. For them, life is not a simple matter of existence, but a question that demands an answer. They are haunted by a restlessness that will not let them sleep, by an awareness that isolates them from those who do not share it. They are the ones who still carry within them the spark of something greater, something that civilization once cultivated, but now seeks to extinguish. And what is to become of those who still see, who still feel, who still suffer beneath the weight of a world that no longer understands them? They are condemned to loneliness, for theirs is a suffering that cannot be shared. The mass man does not recognize their anguish. He does not even comprehend the nature of their unrest. He looks upon them with suspicion, with confusion, even with contempt. Why do you resist? He asks. Why do you not simply accept what is given? And yet, how could they? How could they close their eyes to the collapse of meaning? How could they silence the voice within them that demands something more? The true tragedy of modernity is not that man has lost his way, but that he no longer searches for it. The ancient wanderer, lost in the vastness of existence, still had the dignity of knowing that he was lost. He still longed for truth, for purpose, for something greater than himself. But the modern man does not even ask the question. He has been lulled into complacency by a world that promises him everything except meaning. And so, the seeker, the one who still feels the weight of being, becomes an anomaly, a relic of an earlier age, an outcast in a world that no longer values his suffering. Yet, even in this despair, there remains a choice. The seeker may retreat into silence, resign himself to the inevitable decline, and watch as the world crumbles around him. Or he may resist, not in the hope of reversing the decay, for history rarely moves backward, but in the simple affirmation of his own existence. To see is to suffer, but to suffer is to remain alive. It is to hold on to the last vestiges of what once made man great, his ability to question, to doubt, to long for something beyond the immediate, beyond the comfortable, beyond the trivial distractions of a dying civilization. Ortega y Gasset's The Revolt of the Masses is not merely an observation of political decline, but a warning of spiritual extinction. The mass man is not just the enemy of culture, of art, of philosophy. He is the enemy of the very essence of what it means to be human. He reduces existence to the material, to the measurable, to the mundane. He extinguishes the sacred, not through malice, but through indifference. And indifference is a far greater threat than hatred, for hatred at least recognizes the existence of its opponent. Indifference erases him entirely. And so, the choice remains: to see or to remain blind, to suffer or to be pacified, to fight for meaning, even in a world that has abandoned it, or to surrender to the comfortable nothingness that the mass man calls progress. It is not an easy choice, nor is it a path without pain, but perhaps pain is the last proof that one is still alive, that one has not yet been absorbed into the faceless, thoughtless masses. But what does it mean to fight for meaning in a world that has abandoned it? It does not mean seeking salvation in the very institutions that have facilitated decline. It does not mean searching for guidance among those who profit from confusion. No, the struggle for meaning must begin elsewhere, within, in the depths of the individual soul, where the last remnants of dignity and truth still flicker like dying embers. The modern world offers no guidance for this struggle. It offers only distractions, only the dulling of the senses, only the ever-present murmur of voices that say, "Do not think, do not question, be content." But contentment without meaning is a slow death. It is a surrender to the very forces that have reduced man to a passive observer of his own existence. And so, those who still see must find another path, not one that leads backward, for the past is gone, but one that moves against the current, against the tide of thoughtlessness and apathy. This path is not one of grand revolutions or sweeping societal change. It is not about imposing meaning upon the world through force or persuasion. It is something far quieter, far more personal. It is the decision to live with awareness, to cultivate depth in a world that rewards superficiality, to resist the erosion of the self in whatever way one can. It is the small act of reading when others scroll mindlessly, of thinking when others react, of creating when others consume. It is the refusal to be absorbed into the mass, even when isolation is the cost. And perhaps, in this refusal, there is a kind of triumph. Not the triumph of victory, for the forces of decline are vast and relentless, but the triumph of resistance itself, to suffer and still persist, to feel the weight of existence and not be crushed by it. That is a form of defiance that the mass man will never understand. For he does not see that meaning is not something given, but something fought for, something earned, something that can only be found by those who refuse to accept the emptiness they have been offered. So the question remains, will you see, or will you close your eyes? Will you think, or will you surrender to the noise? Will you resist, or will you be absorbed? The choice is yours, though the world has already made its decision.